So, welcome to my sixth episode of Absolutely Zero Knowledge, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Calum Moore, who is the CTO of Polybase. So, welcome, Calum. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Yeah.
Good, good. And you're also, I just thought you're the first British guest as well, which is awesome.
Really?
It's about time.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a ZK community in London, so I'm surprised I'm your first.
I know, and that's something we could touch upon another day, but I'm trying to revive the ZK community in London and see how far I get with that as well. But yeah, that's a topic for another day. But yeah, it's great to have you. Very interested to learn a little bit more about Polybase and what you're working on at the moment. But first of all, do you want to give a quick intro into yourself? Be intrigued to hear your background and how you stumbled upon the world of zero knowledge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been kind of around crypto since the Bitcoin paper, maybe not exactly when the Bitcoin paper came out, but I was early on in crypto and kind of been following it for some time. But only like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I got kind of deeper into crypto and decided to build a company around it. And I think when we came, actually, when we started looking at kind of what we could do in this space, ZK wasn't even on the radar particularly, and I discovered this really niche area of crypto, and I just kind of fell in love with it, to be honest. The ability to have provable computation seemed to solve a lot of the challenges that we were facing in traditional blockchains, in the space in general. And the more, it's one of those things that like it just kind of, I couldn't escape it. Like the more I looked into it, the more excited I got by the tech. And so yeah, we founded Polybase on the basis of ZK and this idea that we could kind of use it to build something truly different.
Yeah, and you're not the first person who's got a similar sort of route, and I guess whether falls upon or digs deeper into zero knowledge and gets completely obsessed by it. But something I've never asked before, but was it just a case that maybe 2 years ago when you founded Polybase that there was almost no other route into ZK other than founding a business yourself, or was that just an ambition of yours personally? Or yeah, why wouldn't you necessarily look at the typical route of, I don't know, becoming a cryptography engineer, for example?
Yeah, I guess that's just my nature. I think every time I see a problem or I see a new capability in the world, I'm like, oh, what could that solve? Like, how does this change how we see the world right now? And at the time, when you see the world right now with blockchains only able to do 12 transactions a second and everything's in the public, and you're like, well, I love this technology. I love the idea of being able to have people in control of their own money, right? It's particularly around like, obviously, I grew up around the banks failing in 2008, I guess it was, 2007, 2008. That was when I was trying to get my first job, which made it a little bit more tricky. And you kind of see all of these things and you're like, okay, this is really great technology, but it's kind of missing that core component. So yeah, when I saw it, I have kind of a technical maths background, so it's kind of a great fit. I don't have a cryptography background, but I think one of the great things about ZK and having such a niche area with such a strong community is the community has actually been really great in sharing and kind of helping those who come into it kind of really discover and learn more about it.
Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit there. So in terms of your background then, quite maths, but before that, where were you before? And was it just the case that you just, like you said, just read so many papers and looked so deeply into it, lent on the community, and before you know it, you're a ZK expert? Is that how it happened?
Yeah. So I mean, I've actually been doing startups for. I had a startup before this one. That was actually in the Web2 world. But it was around basically moving massive amounts of data around. So it was a kind of data analytics startup. We were trying to make it easier for smaller companies to kind of get the access that bigger companies have. And so I think like that technical background really helped because I think what's really interesting about ZK is it's not all maths. I particularly applied ZK. And if you look at the Halo 2 framework, which is a ZK framework that we use for our rollup, it's more computer science than it is maths, right?
Yeah.
It's more, actually, it's more similar to programming a set of logic gates. It's more similar to kind of back in the day when you were kind of on a really old device and you were having to like really manage memory or manage the low level details of how things work. That's more similar to what it's like. So I think having people where it's, I would say that one of the benefits I have is being from an engineering background,
Yeah.
and being able to kind of apply a little bit of both to ZK.
Cool. And Polybase been going for a couple of years now, am I right? And what are you?
Yeah.
Where are we at now? We haven't really touched upon Polybase at all. So what is Polybase and what are you working on?
Yeah, so we started out with something a little bit different when we first started, which was more kind of doing a decentralized database and using ZK to both make it enable privacy and enable people to access data around that. And we decided that like we took a step back probably around 6 months ago, and we looked at kind of where the crypto industry is going in general. And a lot of the people who were using that product kind of left because the money dried up. And we kind of went back to basics and kind of looked at what is it about crypto that makes it special? What is it that makes it such a revolutionary technology and so vital? And we kind of realized that like it's really all about money, right? Like being able to move money was the first use case of crypto. It's why Bitcoin was created. And Bitcoin to this day solves a huge portion of that problem of a store of value, but it never really solved payments. And there was a bunch of attempts to solve payments. And each of them had their faults and didn't really work on a large scale. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which we can jump into, I'm sure. But when we kind of looked at that, we kind of said, okay, like we've got this incredible technology and we've been using ZK for our decentralized database. Can we use this to make an incredible payments experience? A payments experience that's global, private, and free. And so that's really how the kind of Polybase Labs as we see it today was formed. And so users will see that from their perspective as a app called Payy. So Payy will be the easiest way to pay people, and it'll be a Venmo-like app, which allows you to send USDC anywhere in the world, globally, free and private.
Mm-hmm. And why is no one doing this already? That's my question. Or are they, and you're just better than them, or you've got what's your unique selling point? Or it to me, and I've said it to you off camera and previously, in my head, zero knowledge. When I first stumbled upon it, the most simplistic format would be I'm sending money to you or some sort of monetary value, and I don't have to share any other pieces of information around that. You don't need to know how much money I've got, where it's come from, etc. I'm just sending a payment to you. And the more I delved into zero knowledge, the more use cases there are, and none seem to attack that problem. So I guess going back to my previous question, why is no one doing this, or are they, and therefore what would your difference be?
Yeah, I think there's kind of multiple areas here. I would say like the first one is that a bunch of ZK companies have done money, but I would say they haven't really done it in a way where they're trying to make it. It's not the key. It's not the main thing for them. So actually, Aztec did Aztec money. Mina had a monetary system before that, but none of them really launched it in a way that was like, we want this to be an easy to use platform for people to send money around. It was like, this is a test and this is a precursor to what we actually want to build, which is a generalized ZK smart contract. And so like, I think for the first time and this goes back to our background, both me and my co-founder said, we're both passionate product people, and we're both passionate people about getting technology in the hands of ordinary people. And so like, this isn't like a stepping stone to something else for us. This is the thing for us. This is the thing that we really deeply care about, creating an experience that within 10 seconds, you can pay anyone else in the world, an app. And by integrating all these different components together, it's been incredibly complex because it's not just about doing a ZK rollup and just going, hey, we have this rollup. It's like, oh, we have to do ZK on the phone, right? Okay, how do we make ZK run on a phone, right? ZK is known to be incredibly slow, incredibly hard to run in constrained environments. And we spent a lot of time, and we managed to get it working in under a second or around about a second on a phone to enable that payments experience. So there's a lot of different things we've had to do to make that work. I'd say the other I guess, reason is compliance. I think people have struggled to do this in a compliant way. And that's one of the things that we're really passionate about doing, is making sure that, like, so right now, if you use Zcash in a privacy preserving way, you can't actually offboard that money easily. That money basically gets blocked by every exchange. But we can use ZK to solve that problem. We can actually use ZK to prove that you didn't interact with any bad parties. And enable this kind of revealing, as you just said, revealing only the information you need to make the system work. So yeah, like that's one of our core goals. And then you have the kind of the whole world got taken over, I guess, by ZK for scaling. And I think everyone, back in DeFi summer, scaling was really important. So people were like, okay, we've got this great new technology, we can use it for scaling. And actually, they're not private at all. They're not using ZK for like what ZK is made for, which is, and I think this year and going forward, I hope to see like more companies working on the privacy side of things, because I think that's really where ZK's magic lies.
Cool. And just going back to one of your topics, I've got a few questions. Excuse me, I was keen to ask, and one of them you touched upon there. I mean, your focus very much on compliance, which obviously is a wider issue within blockchain and crypto. But I guess one could say, if I'm, sending a monetary value to you, but there's no way of anyone else knowing, anything else about that value, for example, like you've said, where it may have come from. How are you tackling that issue? Because I guess that might be, and probably a question you've been asked plenty of times, but how do you prevent, or how do you know that my monetary value isn't from ill-gotten gain, say?
Yeah, so as you said, compliance is really important because governments aren't going to go anywhere tomorrow. We might like to live in a world where everything is completely do what you want, but that's not the world we live in. And so we can actually do a proof of history, basically. So if we know that an address is an address which, let's say, is North Korea, we can basically create a proof that that transaction and none of the previous transactions interacted with that address. And what we'll do is we'll time box that to, obviously that expands the number of addresses you have to track over time. But in a cryptographical way, we can basically keep applying new addresses to that list. So you can't necessarily see the addresses that interacted before the one that's sent to you, but you can prove that address isn't included in that list, because that's really what we want to prove, right? We don't want to say, hey, you interacted with Bob, who interacted with Sally, who interacted with James. Like, we just want to say, was North Korea involved? That's all. Like, yes or no. It was North Korea involved. I think every time we look at solutions, we try and think of like, what do we have today? But actually, I think what we want to look at is like, what do we need? What do regulators need? How can we make regulators' jobs easier while maintaining all of the privacy, or as much privacy as we can, while making it work for regulators? Because at the end of the day, we don't want people like North Korea or people who are laundering money and ruining society to be benefiting from private networks, because that will just mean that it gets shut down. That's the be all and end. It will not exist in a functional way. And it will never go mainstream. So we have to live with that reality. And I know some people will struggle to hear that. And we'll do everything we can to make as much private as we can. But also, we're coming from a world where everything is open. So we're 100% better. We're infinitely better, than anything that exists before. And we'll work to make sure that the regulators can see only the information that they need. should just be a yes or no, like literally yes, they interacted with a bad address, or no, they didn't.
Mm-hmm. And do you think this is going to fix, therefore, an innate problem, I guess, in terms of the adoption of blockchain? And like we said, I guess there are some question marks around the sort of privacy that comes with that. So is this product, or is this technology and how you're using it, going to ultimately, fingers crossed, going to increase the adoption?
Yeah, we hope so, right? Like I think, I think crypto is so hard to use today, right? Like it's so unuser friendly. It's amazing that we've got the adoption that we have. What other product in the world do you use where you have to like sign up and then go through like 5 steps, and then you have to, like, if you want to bridge money to somewhere else, like you have to like do like sign 3 different transactions and pay money each time you do it. Like it's really hard for people who are not in the space to understand, and like our goal is to change that, make something that's really easy to use. In fact, people shouldn't know that they're using crypto, right? That's when you've won. If people don't know they're using crypto, but they get the benefits of being private and uncorruptible and global, then that's a win-win situation, right? Like we don't think too much about all the encryption we use in our lives, right? It just lives there in the background. And that's the goal for us, is to get it so that the experience is so good that you can't tell.
Yeah. And right now, is everything you're doing within the crypto space? Is that the aim and just the sole aim right now, or is this going to become the go-to app for all sorts of monetary exchange?
I mean, I think this app doesn't work without decentralization and without the properties that crypto bring. It'll always be based on crypto. Crypto is just short for cryptography, right? Like,
yeah.
And it got hijacked into being for cryptocurrencies, but really, like, crypto originally meant cryptography. And we believe like this new cryptography, ZK, plus all the other cryptography that comes with normal blockchains, enables us to do something magical that wasn't possible before. So yes, like we'll always be a blockchain and using crypto. Do we plan to expand beyond just simple payments? Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have kind of three steps to our vision. One is just being able to like send a payment to someone else. The second is like being able to do more with your money. So being able to maybe get a loan against that money or do other DeFi kind of activities. And I think the final holy grail is having a stable coin that can be used globally. But like you can't jump to the final one. I think right now, like the stable coins have had, some of them have had bad reputations, right? The ones that are not backed by fiat. But to be truly what we really need as a crypto industry is a truly decentralized stable currency, which I think Luna was aiming to do, and obviously we know how that ended up. But I think the ambition and the goal was incredible. I just think the implementation wasn't quite there.
Mm-hmm. And it might not be there for the ambitions of Polybase, but do you see this going mainstream into the banking and finance sectors? And like we said at the start, it's probably the most simplistic form of ZK really, but one that's not being touched upon. But if I'm logging onto my Monzo or mobile banking of some degree, is that going to be something that becomes in a few years' time just inherently backed in the fintech space?
I think if you can't buy a coffee with Payy, then we failed, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the if you can't use it in your day-to-day life, we've not achieved our mission and our goal.
Mm-hmm.
Because money is not useful unless you can spend it. I think in terms of I didn't know whether your question was more about like kind of like, do you think ZK could be used for other things, or are you just saying like as a company is our goal to expand into more traditional finance?
Yeah, I think potentially a bit of both. But yeah, for example, I'm using Monzo or Halifax, whatever it may be, and I'm trying to transfer money. Is that something that is needed in traditional banking, for example, and two, is that something that we're going to see more of?
Yeah, I think firstly, I'll say like, no, nothing will become mainstream if you don't interact with the system that already exists,
Hmm.
right? Like that's number one. You have to find a wedge to get in, and that wedge has to be accessible to people. So yeah, if you can't send money to someone, to one of your friends, and have them accept that as a form of payment, it's similar to the coffee scenario, right? If I can't go to a coffee shop and that coffee shop just accept that I'm going to pay them, they don't get a choice in it, or they've accepted that that's a choice I can make, then we failed. And absolutely, I think we want to make, and we believe we can make that experience better. So just paying your friends right now can be a whole song and dance, right? Like, do you have your bank details? Oh no, like here's my new. Are these your updated ones? Are these the right ones? Right? And yeah, sure, fine. It only takes like a minute or so to like sort it out, but it's friction, right? And I think we can remove that friction. There's some really nice properties. Like one of the kind of mantras we have is like, we kind of lost something when we lost cash. You know,
Yeah,
when you went out with your mates and you wanted to go and buy some drinks, like you could pay your friend and they would instantly have that cash and could go and pay with it. Now we've added like 3 or 4 extra steps in the process of doing that. And like with what we're doing, we want to kind of go back to cash in a digital way, right? Like being able to just send money to someone. Like I've got a friend and I can just use WhatsApp to send them a note from Payy, and that
yeah,
money is like theirs then, right? Like that's the point that the money's been transferred. They can then claim that money. They can off ramp that money with zero cost. Then like they don't even get a choice, right? Because you paid them £10. Like it doesn't
yeah,
matter like what else they do with it at that point. Like the money's already changed hands at that point. So if we can get to that point, which the first version of the app is going to have that feature where you can literally just WhatsApp someone £10 or $10,
yeah,
and they can like claim it now. They can claim it in the future, and it's like one click to claim it.
yeah. I definitely need that amongst my group of mates. It drives me mental. But yeah, like I said, it's the most simplistic in my head and form of zero knowledge. And like I said, I guess if you get it right, there is almost endless adoption to this across the banking sector, whether that's on or off chain. So yeah, I mean, thanks for running through that. I mean, you also touched upon, or do touch upon at Polybase a little bit around MEV, which I know isn't the bread and butter. We've gone through that, but how? First of all, what is MEV? Because once again, I'm seeing more and more of this. We know the likes of Flashbots, for example, who's doing lots of good work in this space. But yeah, you're doing little bits and pieces around MEV?
Well, I think like ZK in general helps with MEV. So I don't know. I can give like an intro into like what MEV is, if that helps.
That would be great.
So MEV is like one of, I guess, an attack vulnerability on Ethereum, where because a validator can choose which order to put transactions in, they can choose to insert, like the ordering really matters, right? So if I'm, let's say, for example, going to buy some crypto and I'm going to do a large order of crypto, right? Well, buying a large amount of Bitcoin on Ethereum would change the price, right?
Mhm.
And so if someone else gets in there before me because they see that trade, they can put their trade in first and actually claim some of the money from me, right? Or they can, there's lots of different types of attack you can do, but essentially it's all about the ordering of transactions. And if I get in there ahead of you, I could just steal your trade. I could copy your trade. There's all sorts of things of basically being able to see other people's trades before them and basically enforce that yours goes first. Now, there's 2 ways that can happen. Either the validator can do it themselves, because any validator can choose what order to put them in. But the more common one is you pay a tip to validators to have your transaction processed as a priority. And that tipping process, so if people can actually calculate how worthwhile it is, and they can make sure that they make a profit with a certain tip, and so that it's basically an easy way to kind of game the system. And everything's secure from a cryptography perspective, right? It's all within the rules of the system, but that means that there's lots of kind of application level vulnerabilities that people have to think about. A lot of time is spent trying to figure out how can we prevent this from happening. And the truth is, it's very difficult to prevent that from happening. when things are private, obviously you can't order you can't really order transactions if everything's private, right? Because you don't know like which one would go first, right? Like you're just blindly processing transactions. And so in that case, and we can even add more additional cryptography on top of that to kind of ensure randomization um, of ordering and of inclusion. But yeah, like I think MEV is one of the big areas which I think ZK solves, but it solves it almost by accident. It's kind of funny because ZK solves a bunch of stuff by accident. Like it solves obviously privacy, but it obviously solves scaling to some extent because you've got all of these off-chain computation that can happen. And MEV is another one of those things that it kind of just solves because of its inherent privacy.
And sorry if I'm being daft here and you've just explained it fully, but in terms of your use cases for ZK within sort of MEV, is it just around that ordering that you mentioned, or what specifically, what part of ZK technology are you adopting then within that sort of
so again,
MEV setting?
It's just because it's private. So because it's private, people can't see the ordering. Now, for payments, it doesn't make much difference because there's not really an MEV, not that I can think of, an MEV tax scenario there. But if, for example, we were to do foreign exchange, right? Somewhat like the ordering of transactions might matter because every transaction that goes through would change the exchange rate. That's normally how the market works, right? So every transaction would change the amount. So I could get a better deal by going first, or I could get a worse deal by going first. But if I know which deal I'm going to get, I could, again, that would be an MEV type attack. I could say, hey, put me first because I know what all the other transactions that are coming through and I want to make some money. And that won't be possible either because it'll be private, so no one will know what the transactions relate to.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And alongside that, there, I think you touched upon obviously I guess the previous guys of Polybase around the sort of database. You've also got ZKBench and Polylang. Are those two things still sort of ongoing on the side? Are they just a bit of a or are they still a bit of a hobby, so to speak, alongside the core product, or are you still doing sort of those bits and on the side?
Yeah, so ZKBench was actually because it's a bit of a minefield in ZK. I mean, one of the great things about ZK is how fast it moves, and it's also one of the worst things about ZK because it adds a lot of complexity for people who come into the space. We're not always talking about the same type of ZK. ZK is fairly broad now. You have different types of ZK, different algorithms, different arithmetizations, different features you can pile on top. And one of the things we really wanted to do was have the capability of reviewing like where the market was, because we wanted to apply it, right? Like we're all about applying ZK in a practical way and like making it into a mainnet system. You have to make decisions about like which technology we're going to use, which ones have been audited, because there's like, I would say majority of them haven't been audited yet. And so ZKBench was our internal way of going, okay, which is the ZK that's right for us? And like, let's do a lot of research about all the different types of ZK we could use, and then let's share that with the community, and hopefully it's useful to other people. So I think we reviewed around 6, and that's not all of them, but that was the main ones. And we went with Halo 2 in the end with KZG, because it gave us the characteristics that we were looking for. So yeah, that's still like something that we're going to continue contributing to and working on. And then Polylang is a ZK language because we wanted to make it more accessible for developers to come in and start playing, and kind of really more than anything, just see like ZK work in action in a very simple way very quickly. And I think like it's very abstract ZK, but like most developers understand JavaScript and TypeScript. So we thought if we can make it feel like that, then we give a really great intro and kind of help people to kind of on that process to understanding it.
And are they sort of almost like a mini version of LurkLang and LurkLab, or are we miles apart there?
LurkLab is a cool project. I actually spoke to the guys there. I think it's quite different in its aims. I would say. So they're both programming languages that compile down to ZK, provable computation. I would say like they've gone down one route, which is a very interesting route, and I think like So they've used more of a recursion route. I believe, if I'm not wrong, they do recursion on every line of code, which is super expensive right now. So it'll be fairly slow to use, but it's kind of more long-term looking. I think it's gonna, if they can really get it to work in a scalable way, I think it'll be really exciting. Whereas Polylang is like something you can very quickly and easy use as a developer if you want to create some quick ZK. But at the end of the day, they're both programming languages, so they're not miles apart.
Yeah, and I think everything seemingly is going down that route about making ZK more efficient, more accessible, in a variety of different aspects. But I guess that's just one of them.
Yeah, I guess it's always a trade-off, because as you build higher abstractions, you make it much easier to use the ZK, but an abstraction, generally speaking, will add layers of indirection and layers of slowness to a system. So it's a trade-off right now, and also like the projects that are doing that tend to be like slower, right? So if you are building, like, my advice is, if you're building a ZK application today, like use the technology that's available right now. And obviously there's a lot of different factors to consider. When we were picking Halo 2, we had to look at, okay, like can we get it to work on a phone? Can we get it to verify on Ethereum? Can we get it to like, what algorithms can we prove via it? What's already the existing ecosystem of those libraries? What's the development look like? Is it been audited by people? And that's what ZKBench, again, like if you go through ZKBench, we outline like a lot of the detail around like all these different trade-offs that you have. Because there isn't, well, like hopefully one day we'll get to a point where you can write in Rust or you can write in JavaScript and it all just compiles down to the same thing. And we'll get there. And to some extent, like RISC-0, we already have that, but you make a big trade at the moment on performance if you go down that route. And it's just something you've got to, if that's fine for your use case, if you're not going to be trying to run it on Ethereum, verify it on Ethereum, then it might be the right use case for you.
Yeah, and I'll share those links, because both I knew a little bit about ZKBench before, and even I found it useful, not from a technical perspective, but just to, I guess, get my head around little bits around the sort of differences between each of those technologies that we mentioned. But also, I'll share more information on Polylang as well, and it'd be interesting, I guess, for people to give that a bash too. Is there, I'd like to wrap things up, and I guess from your perspective as a C-suite member of a ZK startup, what advice would you give for potentially someone looking to enter the space?
Yeah, I'd say just get your hands dirty. There's a lot of help out there. Join the community. There's a couple of different forums you can join, but try and build something. I'd also say, like, it's not as, like, there's various different levels of complexity, so to really try and understand what you want to get out of it, right? Like, do you want to become a researcher, or are you trying to apply to build something? And I would say also don't be put off if you don't come from a purely crypto background, because you can learn this stuff, right? Like, everyone had to learn it at some point, and so like you can learn it too. And I think the more you get into it, the more, like, I think whenever you get into something new, there's a lot of terminology and there's a lot of things that are said that you're not going to understand, but just push through and build something. That'd be my advice.
And that echoes, to be fair, a fair bit of advice that from very similar people like yourselves, that I think it does seem quite daunting at first if someone put a circuit in front of someone for the first time. That's probably quite an intimidating piece of work, but actually if you persist with it and just get stuck in and try and build things, then I think just like anything within software engineering and cryptography, I guess that you'll get there. And it's just about showcasing that, I guess, to potential employers in the best way you can, whether it's an open source work or particular personal projects. Well, that's all I wanted to cover, and I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else before we leave? Any final words of wisdom or bits and pieces you'd like to share for the community before we go?
No, I think just keep an eye out for our app. We're launching mainnet at ETH Denver, so I think yeah, keep an eye out for that, because I think that'll be, there's a couple of surprises we've got in store. I can't really reveal them, but keep your eye out, and hopefully we'll see you there if you're there.
Awesome. I sadly won't be. I've tried, but I'm not. I won't get sign off for that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more about Payy and the work you and the Polybase team are doing. So yeah, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll speak soon.
Cool. Cheers.
Cheers, Calum.